Martin Crawford had built his fortune the old-fashioned way, through 70-hour work weeks and unwavering dedication. At 58, he ran one of Chicago's most successful investment firms. His penthouse apartment on Michigan Avenue reflected his achievements. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, marble countertops, and furniture chosen more for prestige than comfort. But success had come at a price. His marriage had ended quietly 5 years ago, not with anger, but with the sad acknowledgement that two people had simply drifted too far apart. His ex-wife, Catherine, had moved to Boston to be near their grown daughter. Martin saw them twice a year, maybe 3 times if schedules aligned. These days, Martin's life ran like clockwork. Leave for the office at 6:30, return at 7, sometimes 8. Weekends were for golf with clients or catching up on reports. It was a predictable, orderly existence, exactly how he preferred it. That's why he'd hired Grace Okonkwo. Grace was 32, originally from Nigeria, though she'd lived in America for nearly a decade. She came to his home 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, to clean, do laundry, and occasionally prepare meals he could reheat. She was efficient, quiet, and never intrusive. In 2 years, they'd exchanged perhaps 100 words total. Martin left her payment on the kitchen counter every Friday. She did her work and left before he returned home. It was a perfect arrangement, until that Tuesday in early October. Martin had been in Philadelphia for a conference that was supposed to run through Wednesday, but Tuesday afternoon, the keynote speaker canceled, and suddenly there was no reason to stay. Martin caught an earlier train back to Chicago, arriving at his building just after 2 in the afternoon, a time he was never home. As he rode the elevator up to the 32nd floor, he was already thinking about the quiet hours ahead. Maybe he'd finally read that biography sitting on his nightstand, or perhaps just enjoy the silence. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, and froze. Someone was there. His first thought was burglary. His second thought, as he heard a woman's gentle humming, was Grace. But Grace only came on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today was Tuesday. The humming was coming from the kitchen. Martin set down his briefcase quietly and walked toward the sound, his mind racing with confusion. And then he saw her. Grace stood at his kitchen island, wearing her usual orange polo shirt with white trim and yellow cleaning gloves. She was wiping down the white marble surface with careful, deliberate strokes. But that wasn't what made Martin's breath catch in his throat. Strapped to her front, in what looked like a gray baby carrier, were 2 small children, twin toddlers. He guessed, maybe 2 years old. Both had white blonde hair and bright blue eyes. One wore a beige shirt, the other a navy blue one. The child in navy held a yellow toy in his tiny hand, while his brother rested his head against Grace's chest. They were white children. Grace was black. The implications hit Martin like a wave. These weren't her children, at least not by birth. Were they foster children? Had she adopted them? And why were they here, in his apartment? Grace must have sensed his presence because she turned, and the color drained from her face. "Mr. Crawford," she whispered, her accent making the words soft. I didn't know. You're not supposed to be home." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The twins stared at Martin with wide, curious eyes. One of them reached out a chubby hand toward him. "Grace," Martin said slowly, trying to keep his voice level. "What's going on?" Her eyes filled with tears, not defiant tears, but the tears of someone who'd just lost something important. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Crawford, I can explain." "Please let me explain." Martin moved to one of the bar stools and sat down heavily. "I'm listening." Grace took a shaky breath. "My regular daycare, they called me this morning." Pipe burst, flooded everything. "Closed for maybe 2 weeks. I tried to find someone else. I called everyone I know, but..." Her voice cracked. "I have 4 clients. I need this job. I thought if I brought the boys, if I was very careful, if I finished before you came home, you would never know." "The boys," Martin repeated, looking at the twins who were now studying him with that unblinking intensity only toddlers possess. "Who are they?" Grace's hand instinctively moved to rest on one small back. "My sons, Nathan and Noah. I've had them for 18 months now. The adoption will be final in December." Martin sat back, processing this information. "You're adopting them?" "Yes, sir." Grace's voice was barely audible. Their birth mother. She had problems, drugs. She couldn't take care of them. I was their foster mother. And when the state said they needed a permanent home, she looked down at the boys with such tenderness that Martin felt something twist in his chest. How could I say no? They needed someone. I had love to give. The apartment was very quiet except for the gentle sound of one of the twins, Nathan or Noah. Martin didn't know which, making soft babbling noises. Grace, Martin said carefully, you've been working for me for 2 years. You never mentioned children. She nodded, shame crossing her face. I know I was afraid. Afraid you wouldn't want someone with children? Afraid you'd think I couldn't do my job properly. So many people, they hear single mother with twins and they... She trailed off, but Martin understood. He thought about all the times he'd seen Grace work. She was thorough, dependable, trustworthy. She'd never given him a moment's concern. And here she was, raising 2 toddlers alone, working multiple jobs, and still managing to keep his home spotless. How old are you? He asked suddenly. 32, sir. 32 years old, raising 2 toddlers alone in a city where she probably had limited family support. Working as a house cleaner, a job that paid the bills but offered no benefits. No security, no safety net. Martin thought about his own daughter, Emily, safe and comfortable in Boston with a husband and a good job. He thought about how he and Catherine had raised her with every advantage, good schools, family vacations, a college education without debt. Emily had never wanted for anything. These 2 little boys, Nathan and Noah, they had nothing except Grace's fierce determination to give them a life. Stand up, Martin said. Grace's face fell. She thought she was being fired. But she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin and stood, her hands protectively on the twins. I understand, Mr. Crawford, I'll go. I just need to gather... No, Martin interrupted. I want to meet them properly. Grace blinked, confused. Martin came around the island and crouched down so he was eye level with the boys. Hello there, he said softly. I'm Martin. What are your names? The twin in the beige shirt pointed at himself. Noah, he announced proudly. His brother, the one in navy, was more reserved. He tucked his face against Grace's shoulder but peeked out at Martin, with curious eyes. And you must be Nathan, Martin said gently. That's a very fine yellow toy you have there. Nathan considered this, then slowly held out the toy for Martin to see. Something in Martin's chest, something that had been frozen for a very long time, began to thaw. He stood up and looked at Grace, whose eyes were still wary. How often does your daycare close unexpectedly? This is the first time, she said quickly. I promise you, Mr. Crawford, this won't happen again. I'll find another arrangement. That's not what I asked. Martin moved to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. How often do you have trouble finding childcare? Grace was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, she admitted. When they're sick, daycare won't take them. When there's a holiday and daycare is closed. When... She stopped. When money is tight, Martin finished for her. She didn't deny it. Martin turned back to her. In the afternoon light streaming through the windows, he could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight she carried. But he also saw the strength, the determination, the love. Grace, why did you come to America? The question surprised her. For a better life, she said simply. For opportunities. To work hard and build something good. And are you building something good? She looked down at the twins and her whole face softened. Yes, sir, I am. Martin nodded slowly. Then I think we need to make some changes around here. Grace's eyes widened with alarm. First, Martin continued, you're going to bring those boys with you whenever you need to. No more trying to hide them. No more scrambling for last-minute childcare. You bring them here and they can play in the living room while you work. God knows this place could use some actual life in it. Mr. Crawford, I can't. Second, he spoke over her protests, I'm increasing your pay. You're worth more than I've been paying you. And you need it more than I need the money. Grace shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. You don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. I want to. Martin found himself smiling, genuinely smiling for the first time in months. Grace, you've been taking care of my home for 2 years. Let me help take care of yours. The twins, sensing the emotion in the room, began to squirm. Noah reached for Martin with both arms, a gesture of pure toddler trust. He wants you to hold him, Grace said, surprised. Martin hesitated. It had been decades since he'd held a small child. But he reached out and Noah came to him willingly, settling against his shoulder as if he belonged there. "Hello, Noah," Martin said softly, and the little boy patted his cheek with a sticky hand. Grace wiped her eyes. "Why are you being so kind?" Martin thought about that. "I spent 30 years building a career. Grace, I've got money, success, a view of the whole city. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to build a life. You're 32, working 3 jobs, raising 2 children who aren't even biologically yours. And you're building something real, something that matters." He looked down at Noah, who had laid his head on Martin's shoulder with complete trust. "I think maybe you're the one with the better deal." Over the following weeks, Martin's life transformed in ways he never expected. Grace began bringing Nathan and Noah every time she came to clean. Martin found himself scheduling meetings around those days, coming home earlier, sometimes working from his home office just to be nearby. He bought toys, age-appropriate ones, after consulting Grace and set up a small play area in the corner of his living room. The twins loved the wooden blocks and the soft picture books. Nathan, the quieter one, would sit for surprisingly long periods building careful towers. Noah, the adventurous one, was constantly on the move, exploring every corner. Martin learned their schedules, their preferences, their personalities. Nathan liked applesauce but not bananas. Noah would eat anything but hated having his hands wiped clean. They both loved peekaboo and would dissolve into giggles every time. Martin covered his face and then revealed it with a silly expression. One Friday evening in late October, Martin asked Grace to stay for dinner. He'd ordered Italian food, enough for all of them, and set places at his dining table, which he realized he'd never actually used for an actual meal. "This is too much," Grace protested, but Martin could see she was pleased. "It's just dinner," he said. "Besides, I hate eating alone." As they ate, or rather, as the adults ate while the twins created magnificent messes with their pasta, Grace told Martin about her life, about growing up in Lagos, about coming to America with dreams of becoming a nurse but finding the certification process too expensive and complicated, about working her way up from hotel housekeeping to private clients. "I still want to be a nurse someday," she admitted. "But right now, the boys need me. Maybe when they're older, when they're in school." Martin listened, asked questions, learned. And in return, he found himself sharing things he rarely talked about. His divorce. His regrets about not being more present when Emily was young. His growing realization that a view of the city didn't fill the silence of an empty home. "You're a good man, Mr. Crawford," Grace said softly. "Martin," he corrected. "Please call me Martin." She smiled. "You're a good man, Martin." In November, Grace mentioned that the twins' adoption would be finalized on December 15th. "I'm taking that day off from all my clients," she said. "It's too important to miss." "Of course," Martin agreed. Then hesitantly, "Grace, would you mind if I came? To the courthouse, I mean. I'd like to be there." Her eyes widened. "You want to come? If that's all right." "I feel like..." He searched for the right words. "I feel like I've been on the sidelines of life for a long time. I'd like to witness something joyful for a change." On December 15th, Martin sat in a Chicago courthouse beside Grace, watching a judge officially make Nathan and Noah Okonkwo her sons in the eyes of the law. Grace cried. The boys, not understanding but sensing the importance, were unusually quiet and well-behaved, and Martin, to his surprise, found his own eyes misting over. Afterward, he took them all to lunch at a family-friendly restaurant, where the twins made friends with every table around them, and Grace laughed more freely than he'd ever seen. "Thank you for being here," she said as they were leaving. "Thank you for letting me," Martin replied. That evening, alone in his apartment, Martin called his daughter in Boston. "Dad?" Emily sounded surprised. He didn't usually call in the middle of the week. "Hi, sweetheart. I wanted to hear your voice. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. Actually, better than fine." And then for the next hour, he told her about Grace and the twins, about the changes in his life, about how his empty penthouse had become something closer to a home. "Dad," Emily said when he finished, her voice warm with emotion, "I'm proud of you." Those simple words meant more than any business deal ever had. Christmas that year was different. Martin invited Grace and the twins to spend Christmas Eve with him. He set up a small tree, his first in years, and bought modest but thoughtful gifts for everyone. When the twins saw the wrapped packages with their names on them, their faces lit up with wonder. Noah tore into his immediately, revealing a set of toy cars. Nathan took his time, carefully picking at the tape, eventually revealing a plush teddy bear that he immediately hugged tight. Grace's gift, a beautiful bracelet and a substantial check, made her cry again. "It's too much," she protested. "It's not nearly enough," Martin replied, "but it's a start." As they sat together, watching the boys play with their new toys, Martin felt something he hadn't experienced in years: contentment. Not the satisfaction of a successful business deal, but the deep, quiet joy of being exactly where he was supposed to be. "You know," he said to Grace, "when I saw you here that day with the boys, I thought my life was about to get more complicated." "And did it?" she asked with a knowing smile. Martin watched Nathan showing his teddy bear to Noah, and Noah generously offering to share his cars in return. "Yes," he admitted, "but complicated turns out to be exactly what I needed." Grace reached over and squeezed his hand. "We all needed it, Martin. You gave us something we didn't have: security, kindness, acceptance. You gave us family." "No," Martin said softly, watching the twins. "You gave me family. I'd just been too busy to notice I was missing one." Outside, snow began to fall over Chicago, covering the city in white. Inside Martin's penthouse, two toddlers played with their Christmas toys. Their adoptive mother watched them with boundless love, and a man who'd thought his story was all ready written discovered it was just beginning a new chapter. Sometimes, Martin would later reflect, the best moments in life come from the unexpected interruptions. The days when you arrive home early and discover that everything you thought you knew about yourself needs to be reconsidered. That Tuesday afternoon, when he'd walked through his door to find Grace with Nathan and Noah, Martin Crawford had been a successful businessman living in comfortable isolation. By Christmas, he'd become something much better: a friend, a mentor, and an honorary grandfather to two little boys who taught him that the truest wealth isn't measured in portfolio, values, or square footage, but in the love we choose to give and receive. And that was worth more than any fortune he'd ever built.